Join us today on Beyond the Lair, where we have a conversation with the amazing Chastity Davis. Chastity speaks to us today about the importance of where we are and where we come from as Indigenous peoples and who we are, and what true reconciliation really means to us for Indigenous communities and also industry. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Lair. My name is Gina Jackson Montgomery. I'm a proud member of the Seashell Nation. We are so pleased to have our special guest today, Chastity Davis Alphonse. I'd like to introduce my co-host, Dean Montgomery.
Hi, Chastity. Nice to see you. It's Dean Montgomery here.
And we are thrilled to have Chastity Davis Alphonse with us. If you have not heard of her, then you have been living under a rock for the last 2 decades, because she is the most incredible human. Chastity Davis Alphonse is a mixed heritage woman of First Nations and European descent. She is a proud member of the Kalaman Nation, which is just around the corner from me in Seashell, and married into the Chastity Nation. Chastity is the sole proprietor of her own multi-award-winning consulting business, and she's worked with over 125 different First Nations just in BC alone, as well as nations nationally and also internationally. She is well known for corporations, working with corporations, companies, not-for-profits, and Indigenous organizations. Her work is completed in the spirit of reconciliation that we're going to talk to or what we like to call on this show, reconciliation, and focuses on building knowledge and capacities for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous individuals, organizations, communities, and governments. Welcome, Chastity, to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Excellent. So we are going to have a great conversation today. We love about the Bears Lair is not just an interview, but more of a casual conversation. We are friends. You are a big supporter of Indigenous entrepreneurism as well, being an entrepreneur yourself. You're a guest coach on our TV show, which is coming up on June 4th. So we're very excited about that. But maybe we could start the conversation with a little bit about you, where you grew up, how you got into the field that you're in, and then we'll progress our conversation from there.
Sure. Thanks, Gina. Just congratulations on your second season of a wonderful show that promotes Indigenous entrepreneurs and all of the work that you and your team are doing in our communities to uplift everyone. Thank you so much for just working tirelessly to do that. And just want to thank you first off. But I grew up mostly on Vancouver Island. I spent the early years of my life in Cla'emin on the reserve, and then moved to Comox on Vancouver Island, where I graduated. And then I moved to Vancouver to go to college and university, and lived there for over 20 years before I met my husband, and moved up to the Secwepemc territories, which is neighboring to the Chastity Nation. And I didn't know that my mom went to residential school until I was in my early 20s. And so when I found out that my mom went to residential school, I didn't even know what a residential school was. I became passionate about finding out about what was residential school and the impacts that it had. And when I started to learn about residential schools, I wanted to be a part of breaking the cycles of the residential school system, how it impacts our people. And so that's when I moved into working in Indigenous relations and committed to becoming a truth teller, and created presentations called Canadian History through an Indigenous lens. And they've taken many iterations since then, but also wanting to contribute to uplifting Indigenous women through my work. And so I've done lots of volunteer positions in the MMIWG movement, as well as working with government on enhancing policy for Indigenous women. And that was all just from learning about my mother's residential school experience and just wanting to make a difference and seeing that change needs to happen in this country, and it takes all of us to do so. So that's a little bit about a quick sort of background of how I grew up and, just organically coming into this work and stepping into it. And now it's just like a lifestyle. It goes beyond a job or something that, I check into. It becomes a part of your life. And so, we, doing work for fun, working with corporations and Indigenous communities to make a difference. And that's something that I'll always be doing, and something that I've dedicated my life to. And so to see others such as yourself, Gina and Dean, and the folks that you bring on the show, and your brother Shane, and all these amazing people that are working towards the same movement, which is really about improving the quality of life for our people and ensuring that equity and justice happen. And so it's an honor to have a small sliver of a contribution to that.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. What is your definition of reconciliation? Because I know that it's such a buzzword that can be a triggering buzzword, of course, for Indigenous businesses and nations and what have you. But is it just a buzzword for organizations? Because I know a lot of your platform of what you offer, your expertise, are for organizations that are really forward thinking, and reconciliation, like I mentioned, is what we call reconciliation. What are you doing? It's not just, page 4, section A on a reconciliation plan. What's your definition of it, and why is it important to have that and really be authentic with it?
Yeah, I think that's an amazing question. And I think it's something that all Canadians should be contemplating, and that we should have more spaces and places to really talk about reconciliation and what does it mean to us as individuals, as families, as communities, as organizations, and globally. What does that mean, and how do we look at implementing that? So, an elder, Dr. Lorna Williams from the Lil'wat Nation, she always says to me that as Indigenous peoples in the time and space, we need to create more places and spaces to have conversations about, issues that are affecting us. Mainstream organizations and networks have all these places and spaces to talk about issues that are impacting them, and so we need to create more spaces and places for these discussions to happen. So I'm happy that you've asked that. I think that reconciliation can be looked at a buzzword if you're not Indigenous, if it's not like you don't feel directly impacted by it. But but the training and the work that I do is that really about working with folks to understand the truth about our history and our current reality here in Canada. And that is that we have a history of genocide through residential schools and through the Indian Act. And that was accepted in the House of Commons in October 2021. That a motion was passed on the floor. And I'm so surprised that the media outlets didn't pick it up because there was a motion passed that all parties unanimously accepted residential schools as a genocide in Canada. And so when a country accepts and admits and acknowledges that there's a genocide, there's a whole bunch of things that happen internationally in regards to acknowledging genocide. So I think the first step for us as Canadians is to really understand that truth and what happened. So then we can really say, well, what is it that we're reconciling? What is it that, because most people, if they think it's a buzzword, it's because they don't understand what we're reconciling. And so for me, the definition of reconciliation is really about understanding our truth and being able to find and navigate a path forward together to ensure that what's happened, the inequities and the injustices to Indigenous people never happen again, to repair the intergenerational impacts of the genocide that happened through residential schools, to look at providing equitable access to everything in this country that mainstream Canadians have access to. And so I think that that's what it means to me. And it's really about, for me, working with organizations and Indigenous communities and not-for-profits and governments, and really creating a strong foundation of understanding the truth and the context of and creating a strong why for reconciliation to happen. So it goes beyond a buzzword. It goes beyond a bullet point. It goes beyond patting ourselves on the back to say, look what we've done. But it actually, people start to embrace and understand that this is a movement that this current generation of Canadians can enroll into and be a part of, and create change for Indigenous peoples, but for our whole country will benefit when Indigenous peoples are able to step into their highest potential and contribute to, fully contribute to our country. So I think that it's a long answer to your question, but it's something that, I'm thinking about all the time, and having conversations about, and looking at the levers of, how do we really make reconciliation go beyond a trend, a buzzword, a bullet point, something that is like, a nice to do for a corporation, but something that individuals start to really think about within them, self-care, within their self-awareness, that they're having conversations within their families, that organizations are having conversations about it, that we're having conversations about it nationally and globally. So it's like kind of on all levels that I think that we're needing to move towards.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit? It's so fascinating. I know you're working with an organization, or created an organization called DAN, and I believe it's looking at Canadian history through a Silcotin lens, which is so interesting, right? Because if you do put yourself in somebody else's shoes, you can reflect upon how you are as a Canadian or non-Indigenous, and particularly from such a groundbreaking nation like the Silcotin National Government and the people of there. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. As Gina mentioned in my little intro, that I'm married into the Silcotin Nation, and so being married into a community, I always say that I'm in an intercultural relationship, even though we're both Indigenous, because people think, oh yeah, you're both Indigenous, you're both the same, but there's diversity of cultures within Canada, within Indigenous communities, and so I'm considered an outsider being married in. So I've had to really do some research and understand, about the Silcotin culture and understand what it means. And so my husband is a leader in the community, and I said to him, do you have a training that community that they can take a training and learn about the Silcotin Nation? And he said no. So what I did was take the template of Canadian history through an Indigenous lens, and we took that template and created the course Canadian history through a Silcotin lens, and really Chilcotinized it. And we have some beautiful videos of knowledge keepers and elders talking about the different impacts of colonization on the community, and also talking about their path forward. So their definition of reconciliation is they don't like it and they don't use it. And so when we got to that part, they said, we're going to call it a path forward. And so they really talk about the title case that they won in 2014. They talk about, that stopping the mine in one of their most spiritual places on their territory, and what that meant to them in regards to like agency and sovereignty over their lands. They're talking about economic development and, what they're wanting to create within the community, and health and wellness, and reclaiming their matriarchal governance structures. And so it's really this beautiful online program that's about 90 minutes long that will be launching this summer. We also have about a half day in-person component that we launched a couple of weeks ago in Williams Lake. And we had a really great turnout to that. The mayor and council were there, all of the school district, lots of the not-for-profits. So it's just a really great opportunity for folks to learn about that history and the context and for the Sokoteen on their lands and how they're navigating through the history of colonialism and the current reality of it, and how they're really trailblazing a path forward with their title case. So yeah, I think it's a wonderful opportunity for anyone to really learn about a specific nation's history in this country.
Yeah, and I think that, the Silcoteen decision 2014, it's something that all Canadians should know. Made such an impact. And there's been Grassy Narrows and other decisions that were, critical to our path forward as Indigenous people. But the decision in the Silcoteen really was a big game changer.
100%. I'm
For
interested.
Sure.
I'm interested how your world has shifted and changed, because I know that prior to COVID, we were so busy in person, keynotes, traveling a lot, being on panels. Your name was synonymous with a buzzword of just anywhere you were was where everybody was flocking to in respect of conferences and what have you. And your life has slowed down a little bit, not because of course, you have a beautiful baby now, Chinook. And what COVID has allowed a lot of us is that we can do online platforms where we can create programs and we can work from home. Doesn't mean we work any less, that's for sure. But how has your life changed with being a mother? Because I know that prior to being a mother, you were such a big advocate for any kind of female organizations, the missing, murdered women and girls, and also for what we'll get into a little bit in a moment, human trafficking, things like that are your initiatives where you really support and platform. And as a mother now, has anything shifted or changed or been elevated? Or I know that you've got a strong matriarch connection, so.
Mm-hmm. Well, everything has shifted in my life since being a mother. I think, just the way I look at the world, the time that I have, just like aspect of my life has shifted. But I think in relation to what we're talking about here is I'm very conscious about the type of environment that I'm creating for my son. So I always say that as an Indigenous woman, we're born political, whether we know it or not, because of the policies that have governed our life through the Indian Act since the creation of Canada. And so as a political person that was born into it, not even knowing it, mine is, obviously born political, and not just because his dad's a politician, but because of the Indian Act laws that govern our lives as Indigenous peoples here in this country. And so I'm very conscious of that. And I'm very conscious of the type of environment that we're creating for him, which is full of love. What was missing from residential schools, what's missing from the Indian Act, what's missing from the inequity and injustices and the MMIWG is love. And so I'm very conscious about creating that environment of love for my son, so that he can grow up knowing that who he is enough, that he's loved, that he can thrive and be who he wants to be. And just, so that's sort of something that I've been focusing on. And so for me, I've had to pull back a little bit from just working 24/7 to really allow for time to just like be with my son and slow down and create a really important bond with him as his mother, so that he knows that he's loved, and that he has the confidence to be who he is in this world, and that we're teaching him that he's enough and that his feelings are valid. Another thing that our people learned in residential school was that they weren't allowed to feel. They weren't allowed to express their emotions. And so every emotion that little Chinook has is validated. And I think that is also shifting and breaking cycles as well. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. And it's like, we'll celebrate with you when you're joyful, and we'll dance with you when you want, just like all of those things that our people didn't have the opportunity to do with their children for generations because of the mandate that came from the government that we had to send our children to residential schools, or else our parents would be thrown into jail. So I'm just feel so grateful that Chinook is and me are in this time and space where he doesn't have to go to residential schools, and that we have the opportunity to raise him in an environment full of love and support and confidence. And so that's really impacted how much I'm able to be out there and be, on panels and doing things. So I created DN prior to being pregnant, knowing that I was going to shift into motherhood, an online platform, and shifted a lot of my trainings, COVID and stuff, online as well. So I'm really feel grateful for the opportunity to connect with folks through technology. And so I could speak for hours more about how my life has shifted, but I feel like the final thing that I'll say about being a mother is that it's the greatest honor of my life. And when Chinook came into the world, I said, if I never did anything else career-wise or anything else in my life, I feel complete. And so he's a gift that I will treasure for the rest of my days here.
I think, I feel the same as being a mother, where it's the minute that my babies were born, that was my biggest accomplishment that could ever make or be. And now that they're teenagers, I think, is this my greatest accomplishment? But no, just kidding. Amazing. Can you tell us a little bit? And I know I touched on one of your initiatives, and we're talking to the great Susanna Pierce very shortly on another podcast that we're doing about human trafficking and about what your definition of that is, and then how this is happening in our backyard, and what your place is of how to really elevate the education on this.
Yeah, thanks for asking that, because I think it's really a timely and important discussion that we have as British Columbians and Canadians about human trafficking. I think that human trafficking has happened on these lands since the early settlers, and I'm passionate about and motivated to ensure that we are all aware that the crime of human trafficking has existed on these lands since the early settlers came. And our women, Indigenous women, have been trafficked since the early settlers landed here in Canada. And it's actually why the Sokoteen people and their warriors declared war on the Canadian government in 1864, is because of the treatment and the threat of trafficking of their women. And I believe that many other Indigenous communities have similar histories around their women being trafficked. And that still translates into this modern time and space of having thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and two gender diverse individuals that are being trafficked. And so I think that it's something that is largely invisible in our society. And so to be able to really penetrate the issue, we have to bring the invisible and make it visible, and really start having conversations about what is human trafficking? What does it look like? It's happening every single day under all of our noses, right before our eyes, that all women, not just Indigenous women and girls, but all women and two-spirit and gender diverse individuals are at risk of being trafficked. And we have to have a really real conversation about why is there a market for that and who is trafficking them. And And so I think that, I'm passionate about raising awareness that this is a crime, and a crime that hasn't received the attention that it needs and the resources that it needs to be able to really penetrate it and to keep our women, our children, our two-spirit and our gender diverse relatives safe. And so Susanna Pierce is the CEO of Shell, and has over the years become a very good friend of mine, as well as her honor, the Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia, Janet Austin, who I've known for a very long time and is a good friend of mine as well. When they partnered to bring awareness to this anti-human trafficking network, they asked if I would chair the working group meetings and to support their work. And of course, I said yes. And the network was created not to duplicate or reinvent the wheel or to take away from the amazing work that's been happening for decades. But really, the whole premise of the network is to be able to bring all of those people together and more, like corporations and other individuals that are interested in seeing human trafficking end in this country. The network was created to bring us all together. And to really look at where are the gaps in resources and services that we can keep our women and children and two-spirit and gender diverse relatives safe. And so we've had our first working group meeting, and we're going to have 3 more this year. And there's some wonderful initiatives that are happening under the leadership of Susanna Pierce and Janet Austin. And so I think that they're really wanting to raise awareness and to fill in those gaps of where resources are needed. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, there is more information on the Lieutenant Governor's website. So yeah, I just am passionate about just seeing women, children, two-spirit and gender diverse peoples being safe from not being exploited. And this also allows, this network allows us to be able to bring awareness, to have the platform to do so, and to share the stories of the origins of how this has impacted our communities as Indigenous peoples, as well as we're disproportionately affected in this country by human trafficking.
Yeah, when Jean and I had the honor of attending the event, a networking event with you and Susanna, and I was really moved by it. There was a really powerful speaker there. I can't remember her name right now, but she actually grew up in the same small town that I grew up in, a fairly affluent town in southern Ontario, and you didn't realize how subtle human trafficking can be, and it happens before your eyes. And I think, the light that this network is shining upon it is just amazing. So, I was really moved by it.
And I think it's really important to educate the youth on something about that too. We have teenagers, and of course, Chinook is it's not just limited to women, for sure. But we have teenagers as well, and once teenagers get disconnected, they spend so much time on their phones. They feel disconnected. They're looking for love in all the wrong places, and to really pay attention to what your kids' behaviors are, and where they're going and what they're watching and who they're speaking to, for sure. But yes, if you want to learn more about it, again, the organization, Lieutenant Governor. And I don't even know how Susanna yourself, and she has time, but this is how meaningful this is. And speaking of youth, what are your wise words to say to Indigenous youth today that are growing up? I know that Dana and I have an initiative with Youth Entrepreneur Kids Camps, where we teach kids 11 to 18 about entrepreneurism, but mostly life skills and public speaking and hearing their voice and social confidence and what have you. But as an Indigenous leader, as a mother now, what do you have to say to the youth today about growing up in the environment that we're growing up, and how we can be powerful?
Yeah, I think I would say what was told to me by the elders is to spend time learning who you are and where you come from. That's our greatest asset, is our culture. and our greatest allies, and to spend time on our lands and to spend time in nature, because that's who we have always been as Indigenous people, is we see ourselves as interconnected to nature. And in this time and space, it's so easy, as you had mentioned, Gina, to get lost looking into our phones and to our screens and to social media to find who we are. But who we are as Indigenous people has always existed out in nature and on our lands and within our culture and in our language. And so I think that the value of who we are, and that we're actually able and not outlawed like we were generations, but able to access our lands, our culture, our language, our stories, our ways of being and knowing. To youth, I say spend the time to do that. And because that is our culture, our knowledge, our ways of being and knowing is going to carry you through the hard times in life, and also lift you up when you're shining, and celebrating and doing what you love in life. And so to all Indigenous youth, I would say spend the time in nature and with our people and learning about our culture.
I think it's so important to hear something like that, because technology, education-wise, AI has taken over in so many different ways, with writing, with whatever it may be academically. But being with nature, being with the land, not extracting resources, but preserving resources. These are things that can't be done by a computer. And I think it's really important to hear that from you. I know that when you go out into nature, you feed off of the energy, and the energy feeds off of you. And I think that's really, really important. And so
I agree.
Lastly, because I know that you have a hard stop. Lastly, I guess I just want to ask, how do people get a hold of you as an organization? So number one, what do you do for Indigenous communities that want to maybe get a hold of you to find out about authentic a reconciliation plan, or vetting appropriate proponents or partnerships? And then how does industry get a hold of you or your resources to become better partners working with Indigenous communities? And why is it so important that you're a decade behind if you haven't got a reconciliation plan right now?
Yeah, great question. I think all organizations that want to have meaningful relationships and contribute to the truth and reconciliation journey that we're on here in Canada, number one, needs to invest time and resources and into creating an Indigenous reconciliation action plan. And as you said, you're a decade behind if you haven't done that. And so there's a very strong business case to be investing in creating an Indigenous reconciliation action plan. And if you don't know what that is, happy to share with you what that is. And the organizations that I've worked with and that I'm working with to help them build their own are some of the largest corporations within our province and in our country. And so there's many organizations stepping forward, like TELUS has a wonderful Indigenous reconciliation action plan that I helped them create. You can look online for their plan if you're interested in looking, and many other organizations. So my website is chastitydavis.com, and all my information is there for any companies that would like to get up to speed and also show some leadership in the spaces that they're operating in. And for Indigenous communities that, would like someone to come in as a keynote speaker to help them create Canadian history through their nation's lens course, to advise them on how to negotiate with government and organizations and industry. Same, chastitydavis.com, and my information is all there. And I'm looking forward to continuing to be a small part of this important movement. I'll just end with saying that, I talked a lot about history, and I think that, it's important that I also state that in this time and space, there's actually not much that we can do about the past. But it's important that we learn about it. It's important that we understand the context of what's happened on the lands that we're living in. what we do have the agency over in this time and space, and as this current generation, is the change that happens in this time and space. And so I always want to say, like, one day we're going to be the ancestors. One day people are going to look back at this generation. Who we want to be known as? What is the legacy we want to leave? And so those are some questions that I always leave for folks, for them to contemplate, is, what type of ancestor do you want to be? What type of legacy do you want to be? And for me, I want to be the generation that actually told the truth and faced the truth and started to create change for Indigenous people, so that my husband's always quoted as saying that Canada won't reach its full potential until its Indigenous peoples have the opportunity to do so. And so I just want to raise my hands to you, Gina and Dean, and your teams that support you in all the amazing work that you're doing in uplifting our people. And just want to really acknowledge you again, as I did at the beginning, because this is heart work. This is, like I said, it's not like something you clock into at 8 a.m. and you go home at 4. This becomes a lifestyle. And so I just really want to raise my hands and thank you for everything that you're doing in our communities to create change. And I look forward to continuing to support your work and be your cheerleader, and anything I can do to just support the movement that you started with Bears Lair, and all the things that you've created around this beautiful community of Bears Lair, not just the TV show, the youth camps, the podcasts, just like all the Indigenous communities you're working with, uplifting. It's really, it's an industry that you're creating, and it's really inspiring to see. So thank you so much, and all my relations.
Oh, thank you so much, Chastity. Love you, respect you, and honor you, and good luck with all of your initiatives. And I know our paths cross on a rapid basis, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah, say hi to Chief Joe, please.
Yes.
Will do. All the best, both of you. Thank you.
Best. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Beyond the Lair. Please follow us, download this episode, and follow us on social media on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok.